Hey everybody, welcome to the CUNDA-CAST podcast, episode 5. I'm here with Jeremy from Build-A-Soil,
What's up, guys?
and today we're just going to be talking about what a Build-A-Soil has going on, and any other grow topics. So, when did Build-A-Soil start?
So it started in 2012. I think we got our EIN number all official in like the very beginning of 14, but we were, running the business all through 2013. And it wasn't until 14 that we really said, hey, this is something I want to do full time and go after it. And so that's kind of the timeline. It's been about 10 years, it seems like.
So, when did it really strike popularity?
I'd say like right in 2014 when we started it, I coincided that with leaving a job that I was at and really put all my effort into it. And it started working, I wouldn't say right away, but I remember I was disc golfing and my phone went ding and I looked and I had an order. And it was like the first time that ever happened without, me being on the phone and interacting. And it was a really weird feeling. And then after that, orders started coming in fairly regularly. I was just answering a lot of grow questions and helping people out. And then it seems like they would reciprocate by placing an order if they needed something. And then I forget what year it is, but I think 2015 or 16, we moved into this building that we're in. And it was the first building in the parking lot. Now we lease, I think, like 5 buildings here. But when we moved in, it was pretty empty. And we weren't even mixing soil at that point. We were, custom mixing soil occasionally, but really what the goal was to provide products that helped other people build soil. And eventually, we realized that a lot of people just wanted us to mix the ingredients together for them. And so we started doing that here in this office. And it made dust for all our offices, and it was clear we would need another building and some equipment. And it just kind of snowballed. We ended up leasing another building that coincidentally had burnt down in the same large area owned by the same commercial real estate owner. And he was rebuilding it. And so when he rebuilt it, it came on the market, and it was about the same time that we needed some more space. And it's kind of serendipity. So at that point, we expanded, and today we're still in the same location. We just have a few extra buildings around the parking lot that allow us to manufacture and transfer to a shipping building, and have our offices. And I want to say right when Corona hit, it was kind of scary, but we were in the middle of having our landlord build a new building, which became 50/50 Townsend, and that is the soil production building. And we had just quoted out and gotten approved for a loan on the soil mixing equipment. And we got some of it used, some of it new to try and save on the budget. And we had it all engineered to work together to the shape of our building. And then Corona hit, and it was like really hard to get the building done and get other particular pieces put in place. But it's done today, and that's what we use. So it's been pretty fun.
So I've realized as like when I started out, um when I was picking out a medium, I wanted something all put together. But now I realize like I kind of just want to mix my own almost and learn these recipes. And I don't know if it's
Yep.
different for other people where they start out mixing and they're like, well, no, I feel like it's easier to buy them. But yeah, I like to mix my own now. It's kind of fun. It's more of a learning experience. And
Yep.
so what when did you realize this is what you wanted to do?
I was just thinking about it all day. And I think anybody that has that personality that gets kind of latched on to something that they really like. And I was at work thinking about it. At home when I was growing, I was thinking about it. And I've always had this kind of entrepreneurial drive. And so I think anybody that has that, they're trying to connect things that they really enjoy with some viable way to produce an income. And the dream is to be able to do what you enjoy and do that for a living. And so that's really where Build-A-Soil was born. I realized, I live in a rural area, and even for me, it's hard to access a lot of the resources required to experiment, to build soil, to play with different inputs. And so I'd go locally to the facilities that are here available, the different stores, and I'd try and source products, and I could do okay. But I ended up going to a lot of strange websites and making phone calls and trying to source products. And it was a lot harder then. It's easier now, but I realized, a lot of people might want some of the same stuff I'm getting. And so it was almost like a way to crowdfund my my hobby. I'm like, well, if I can get a whole pallet of kelp meal, it'd be cheaper for me, and maybe other people would buy some, and I'll get the best kind. And um, I just thought, maybe this would work. So I threw up the website and I put a couple Craigslist ads. I just tried some stuff to see, like, does anybody have any interest at all, or is this going to be super hard? And either way, I was motivated. But to my surprise, there was people that were like, "Yeah, I'd like some worm castings, and I want some other products." And at that point, I was like, I could really get into this, and I like sourcing these ingredients, and I like asking all the hard questions and figuring out how to get it in here. And so it just took off, and to the point now where it's almost too complex. We're really cutting back. We've grown quite a bit over the years naturally, but through that natural process, we've added lots of things that we've not kept up with. There's certain SKUs that we don't want to carry any longer, and so we're really going through a big cleaning of the house right now to make sure that, like, if Build a Soul is a restaurant, we only want to offer our best meals and nothing else, and make sure that anyone that comes here has a great experience. And it's been tough. I started it in my garage, and I've had to learn every single lesson the hard way. I promise. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I've noticed trying to sell hand mixed soil through Facebook Marketplace. It's pretty tough because people they like the trusted brands or the big name brands, and um they also like convenience, like delivery and stuff. They don't want to come pick it up, even if you're undercutting the price of living soil or any soil. It's still pretty tough. So
Yep.
it's hard to gain interest. But when you started, how was the market at that time?
The market was really non-existent. I mean, it was. There was people that were obviously willing to purchase from me, but there wasn't a proven no-till growers group of people, right? So we had to both simultaneously create the customer base, educate them, and then provide the product all at the same time. And it worked just because we were all passionate about doing it, and there was a number of living soil, like no-till growers, that were also wanting to do more of this. And so we were all basically regurgitating the same information to each other. Anybody new that would come in, we teach them the way. And that eventually became what we call the Build a Soul way. But that's just all of us were doing. And that community started to grow. There was people that were, trying to prove it on a commercial scale for the first time, which now it's been proven. And as with anything in farming, not without challenge. But I feel like nowadays versus 10 years ago, it's an option on the table. It's, would you want to grow no-till? Do you want to grow hydro? Do you want to grow soilless cocoa? What do you want? Where when we first started, it's like, wait, what's no-till? What is that? What do you mean? So the market wasn't as pronounced, but just like with any business, I just started with those that I could help, and I was just in Facebook groups and other places where people were asking questions. And because I'd gone through so much trial and error trying to learn this, I could oftentimes pinpoint what maybe a problem was, or help someone overcome something, or maybe they were overthinking pH or whatever may have been going on. And we'd all bantered so much back and forth through this trial and error that we'd come up with a lot of these solutions or these recommendations. And I just started sharing those with people. It worked, and they would come buy a product or two, tell a friend, they'd buy a product or two. And eventually the problem just became, well, how do we keep up with the logistics and provide good business service, as opposed to how do I help people from my garage, which it's easier. In the beginning, I could only talk to a few customers at a time. And so even if I had to personally pack every order and manage the logistics of ordering the raw supplies, it was easy to keep up with. And as anything grows, you just have to get better systems in place. So it's been like the garden taught me, and then I would teach other people, and now the business is teaching me. And so it's been kind of weird, like duality effect, where the garden really is teaches you a lot of these lessons before you get even started. Like, if you're not disciplined and you don't water, the plants don't grow. If you don't put a system in place, you can only be so many, you can only grow so many plants. And then on top of that, when my wife started running the vegetable farm that we have, whole nother layer of lessons about scalability and process. So, man, it's crazy how much gardening's really kind of taken over my life. I never thought I'd be doing this. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I understand that. There's something just about gardening in general, seeing something that you put your work into, basically grow into something that you see every day, and like in the nature and stuff. And it's there's something zen about it, and just something so rewarding about it. Um,
Yeah, it's really true. It's like 3D printing, but via nature. You get the DNA in the seed and put it in, and it starts to print it, so to speak. And I know that a lot of grow styles put you in control of that, but the no-till way is to kind of just watch it, to be a steward, to give it what it needs to do its own work. And it is. There's something very unique. So much of our world is so digital
yeah,
that having something so real and tangible that needs you, it's like having a pet. And I agree. It's really, really rewarding. And for me, when I started Build a Soil, it was a big transition point in my life. So I really, really needed that. I really wanted to have that connection and something to spend time with, something that needed me that I didn't have to tend to. Um, and so I think it can be that important part of a lot of people's lives, especially when they may be lonely or in a transition period career wise or whatever it may be. It's an area of solace, an area where we can kind of escape. And I've noticed a lot of our customers, they feel the same way. So it's pretty cool.
yeah, for sure. And I've noticed lately uh, that clones have become like way more popular for the convenience. And personally, I like growing from seed just so I can see every stage of what's going on, and I feel like more seed should be put out there and stuff. But I understand the convenience. I just personally like to see every stage of the growth. It makes it even more rewarding in the end.
Yeah, no, I love growing from seed. I think everyone should. If it weren't for the fact that clones can oftentimes degrade in health or bring unwanted pests, I would grow from clone more often because it's nice to get something of a known quality
Yeah.
and not have that gamble. Of course, sometimes you win on the gamble and you get something really unique that's fun, but really, some of the proven cuts that are out there,
Oh yeah.
they are phenomenal in comparison to what you might just get out of the roulette of a seed pack. However, I prefer to hunt mainly because of those issues. Now, if it's something that I've hunted from seed and I've got a clone of it, that's great. I like growing from clone. But I think that most growers, especially if they're new, they should definitely avoid taking in exciting genetics because oftentimes there could be disease, pest problems. And when you don't know how to identify them, you end up chasing your tail, correcting other issues. So, yeah, I definitely have feelings about that. But
Yeah.
I just know the original path most people get started is either they grow from seed because they have no other choice, some bag seed or something they had,
Oh yeah.
or they get given some clones, and that's like, oh, how do I grow? So
Yeah. Yeah. So I've recently started uh, just mass planting seeds, and I've been and just weeding them out basically. The just weed them down to four like plants based on vigor that I like out of it stuff. So in the end, I kind of just hunt them down to the four best plants.
yep,
Which you can't really do as somebody who doesn't have access to see like a ton of seeds and stuff. But so I do consider myself lucky there. So I do understand why clones have more popularity.
yep.
Um,
Well, and plant count too. I mean, if I could go pop 3,000 seeds without any worry,
yeah,
I could let them all run their course
yeah,
in a sea of green, and then pick my favorite ones and re-veg them, or I could already have cloned them. But it becomes a little scary when you're like, hey, not only do I have a plant count issue,
yeah.
but then if you pop 100 and narrow it down to four just off the initial vigor, what if one of the less vigorous ones had the best characteristics
Oh
and
yeah,
vigor wasn't important? So it's always like this question in your mind as a grower
yeah.
that you just wish you could grow everything out. And quite frankly, even if there was unlimited plant count, there's still resources and time and all that. So
Yeah.
um, sharing with each other will always have its place, what we find, but I think it's important that many of us are hunting,
Oh yeah.
finding that next, exciting thing.
Do you have a pheno that you've hunted that's your favorite so far?
I really do enjoy growing from seed, and I enjoy most all the herb that I grow as long as it's of good quality, right? Terpy, it's potent, and a lot of breeders are able to put out consistent quality.
Yeah.
But over the years, I've had some that I've kept around for years or shared with friends and gotten back and really enjoyed it. But right now, I've cleaned house. I've got basically nothing. I do have a mom plant that I'm about to make of the fruit by the funk because I really did enjoy that from Covert Genetics, but I really did enjoy the halitosis as well. And I think that it was just the Chem D I-95 like cross that was in that I gravitate towards because of that fuel. And what I think it is about it to me is that it coats your palate, has a strong translation from smell to taste, and it's really potent. And so for the most part, as long as I have some genetic that has a lot of that taste and that potency and that fueliness to it, I also like to alternate with something maybe a little bit hazier or sweeter or just something unique. And then that way I have jars of both types, so to speak. That's what works really well for me. But I tend to gravitate towards the fuel almost no matter what. And unless I'm really looking just for something different for the day.
Yeah.
Um, so like right now at home, we did as part of the Discord group through Patreon, that people that kind of support our YouTube, they were doing a 420 grow off. And so I popped some seeds for that and I'm really excited about them. Some of them were from Kid Kaya, who's a local breeder out of Paonia, and he's got some really good genetics. And then 3 of them are GMO back cross from Covert that I'm really excited about because, the GMO it's fire.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those unique scenarios where it's like local people have the cut, so I can just grow that. But I'm kind of curious to see how close any of these seeds come. And it's more of just like a fun search for me, see if there's anything unique in there. So we'll find out.
Yeah. I like another thing I like about seeds, just seeing the different characteristics of all these phenos. And like last grow I got a purple out of 4. And I was like, wow, that's really cool how all of these start from a seed and they basically just develop different characteristics, kind of like people do. Uh, and it's just like comparing that, it's just really cool. And yeah, so next run I'm doing exotic genetics sherbadelic, and I think something from Grower's Choice, because I've worked out something with them, and so like yeah, that will be cool. But what was your longest living mother plant?
I don't know. I never keep one mom around. Meaning, if I had a mom, when I would clone it, I would take extra clones and I'd make a new mom. And the main reason why is I think that plant health is super important.
Yeah.
And keeping a mom around for too long oftentimes leads to stagnation in health. And I felt that taking a clone from a very healthy mom and reestablishing a mom is better than
Yeah.
trying to keep up with a mom that's getting roots, root bound and trouble to keep up with. But I have kept some for years,
Or
multiple years, where I would just root prune it and repot it, top dress and water it, and I would lower the light for periods of time. And when I wanted to flower, I would put it in more intense light, feed it. But I never really kept track. Where some people are like, I have the same mom since 1995. It's like, okay, if you can do that, it was never a goal. I think there was a thought that if you create a clone from a clone from a clone, it's not the same. And so it's better to keep original mom plant. But I think that plant health is probably more important. I'd rather
yeah.
have a healthy mom from a clone from a clone from a clone than a mom that's been around for 10 years that's been through the ringer, might have diseases and it's been barely nursed back to life several times. I think either way, though, as long as it gets healthy before you take clones, you should have good results. So,
Or let me rephrase that. What is the longest living, not mom, but like pheno?
that
Yeah.
kept around, so to
Yeah.
speak. Oh, man. I had some marshmallow OG that I probably kept for around like 5 years. Other ones that I kept around, like, shoot, we've had the Gorilla Glue around here forever, but I didn't keep it for that long just because friends had it and then I'd get it back. So a lot of times when you have a whole bunch of buddies that are keeping cuts, makes it a little bit easier. So say 5 years.
Oh, nice. Um, so what does Build-A-Soil have going on right now?
Man, lots. We just made some huge changes. We had a pretty big developer team, and they wasn't making a big enough difference for our customers versus all of the money that we're spending. So we just changed our process. We no longer have a developer team. We're really just refocusing on manufacturing the products, making sure the quality is the best, and reducing the number of SKUs that we have. That way we can just focus on making those the best as always as we go into the future. Otherwise, Build-A-Soil is always just working on a few different, things behind the scenes. Like we've got a couple custom soil recipes that we'll be launching over the next couple months, but those plans got kind of pushed on the back burner just because this spring we got more wholesale orders than we're used to. And so the wholesale orders, when these gardening stores order pallets and pallets of soil, and we have small boutique production, all of a sudden we found ourselves working overtime and needing extra labor just to keep up with making 3.0 and build a soil light. And while that's exciting and everything, it kind of slows down some of the other ideas that we have. So really, right now what Build a Soil's got going on is just making sure that we do the basics right.
Yeah.
And I'd say we're doing pretty well. We're caught up on most of the orders, but there's maybe 100 customers that are still waiting on some very small builds that we don't make as often that need like 2 items made here, a couple items there. And so we're really, really worried about that. And we're focused on just getting all of those back orders built.
Yeah.
And part of the idea of reducing some of our offerings is, if we don't have these rare recipes that only sell maybe 5 orders in a couple months, we wouldn't have to jump around making different recipes so many times.
Yeah.
And so I think Build a Soil is just constantly growing up as I grow up, getting better accounting, getting better inventory control, learning how to manage people better. Just like the garden is constantly teaching you lessons, they're relentless on the business side too. But I think they can be just as fun. You just have to be kind of open minded to it. And when I was growing and I was really counting on the harvest because I needed to maybe share some of it with some friends or whatever the reason was, it felt stressful sometimes too. Like, man, I hope I get enough yield. I hope I make it,
Yeah.
And since business has been well and I don't require the herb any longer, the stress has been completely lifted from it. I just don't care what results there are. I just never want to run out. And
Yeah.
since I've started to Build a Soil, and even since then, since I started growing, I've never been out of herb again. Like,
Yeah.
should I remember before Build a Soil? It's like, if you ever had to scrape resin out of your pipe, you're like, man, the guy, my dude won't call me back. What's going on? And so when you become a producer, a grower, it's like things just shouldn't happen. I know a lot of growers when they first grow, they expect a huge yield and it may not be as big.
Yeah.
They end up sharing a whole bunch of it with friends and run out. But once you learn those lessons and you set up enough grow space for yourself, kind of takes the stress out. You just always have more abundance, more than required. So
Yeah. 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 In the beginning, it's almost like you worry about, oh, if I do this to my plant, oh, that's gonna affect it. It's gonna stunt it. It's gonna affect my yield. And then as you go on, it's like now I'm just like bending stems, like, oh, yep, that's gonna be stronger now because of what I did there. That's gonna be that, and it's almost like you get into experimenting, and it's like you don't really care about your yield as much as just learning about the plant and learning what it can withstand, what you can do to basically affect your yield in a way that's good or bad. And if it goes bad, just take it as, oh, well, I mean, that's a learning experience. That's something I know now that's bad. And you can just go
yeah, and
and
it's good to go through as fast as possible all those lessons. That's why it's fun to try different things.
yeah,
If you only grow one plant a year, it's going to take you 10 years to have grown 10 plants. But if you grow 10 plants at once, you get all that experience in your first round. And so um, there's definitely levels. And that's why a lot of the commercial growers that have thousands and thousands of plants under their belt, you listen to the anomalies that they see. You're like, yeah, I've seen buds grow out of leaves and all sorts of strange things that takes you a long time to see at home. Um, but still, I still think that like there's so many things that happen, and after a decade of growing, you've kind of seen them all as long as you're doing it pretty regularly.
yeah,
And Build a Soil, I've been growing 24/7, 365 since I started. I've never not had a grow going since I figured it out. And I think a lot of us are like that. I know some people kind of pop off a grow once a year, but most of us that get into growing are pretty regular users. And so we like to have fresh cannabis and it just makes sense to keep it going all the time. It's so much fun.
yeah. So what's weird is this is weird. I don't know how many people do this, but I'm not a user. There's so I've tried before, and
Yeah.
it's something with my anxiety that it just kind of triggers it hard. But I the reason why I grow is because I respect the plant, and I just like growing in general, and I like learning about the science behind it and everything. And I don't know if that seems weird to people because I don't use or I don't smoke or I don't like I don't know. But
It's weird,
yeah,
but at the same time, I get it.
yeah,
I mean, I think it's strange in the sense that when when I'm looking for a pheno, a lot of it is how it affects me
Yeah.
and the taste and all those things. So I think a lot of that goes out the window, but that doesn't matter because you're going to be ultimately growing from seed to see different things and to experience
Yeah.
different results. And so your preference for what type of seed you grow might be completely different. And then there's other people that are growing that don't participate, but they still need to learn this because they're growing medicine for someone else and they really care about
Yeah.
it. They care what goes into it. And so there's levels across the board, you
Yeah.
know?
So I actually have a friend that tests all my stuff for me since I can't or I don't.
Man, everybody could use a friend like you.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's what was I gonna ask? Oh, so what is the toughest like almost want to say ingredient that's to basically get your hands on?
Right now, it's our Q-Yaha, and we started working with that product. Coot even told me about it a long time ago, but long story short, Jay Plant Speaker was also using the product. I was using the product. I was wanting to release something with it. So we decided, let's like teamwork here. It's so much more fun. And then we get a guy who's running a greenhouse that's so seasonal, and he gets to have some income from something unique that he's using and can help people with. And so we made the Jay Plant Speaker Q60, the Q-Yaha product. And unbeknownst to us, it was really fun in the beginning. We went through lots of inventory and it works really well. But behind the scenes, the vaccine industry was starting to get into the Q-Yaha industry because it works so well for a number of different animal vaccines and other products because it's a natural emulsifier and they require that. And they completely bought out all of the production capacity for the next couple of years and kind of tanked the entire market. And some people thought we were charging a little too much for the product, but we could not get our hands on it. It was impossible. Some of our purchase orders were like over $100,000 just to buy raw material for that one SKU, and we have like 1,200 SKUs. So it was like, man, this is hard. And then it would take a long time to get in. Then we make it, then ship it, and all of a sudden they're like, sorry, we don't have any more, and we're not going to have any for years. And so we backpedaled, and we found that the Q60 in particular was extra filtered and that removed some of the sugars and some of the other natural material in there. And that was what was better for the vaccines. And so that material was hit the hardest, where the raw material that's made directly from the branches comes in at 20 to 40% saponin, and that was easier to get and still a great material. It's just when we first started, we thought, let's just get the best there is, regardless. And so now we have the Q20 and we're able to keep it in stock, but we just found out our next batch is going to be more than double our regular purchase price, which in the next couple of weeks is going to affect the price of the product that we're selling. And it sucks because I really like it. But at a certain point, it's like, this is no-till gardening. We just need some sort of emulsifier. It doesn't need to be the most expensive one.
Yeah.
So had prices stayed regular and availability was regular, it'd be fun. But this one was difficult. And so I'd say across the board, it's the same. There's not one product that's like a widget that you can sell. All those are no margin and a race to the bottom. They're all electronics from China or plastic or whatever. But worm castings, compost, all of those are limited in availability and quality. And so I can't just pick up the phone and call some new worm casting guy and say, yeah, I'm out of worm castings. Your website says you have worm castings. Can you send me a truckload? First of all, he won't have a truckload. Most people don't. Their business isn't able to support that. And if they do, it 9 times out of 10 is not going to be anything remotely similar chemically or even texturally to what we're using from a certain supplier.
Yeah.
And so as we started to scale up, it became challenging to continue to source. But, some of the original suppliers like Malibu Compost and Ole Mountain Fish Compost, they were so much larger than us that we're still not hit their capacity yet. And one of the things that we did is we would like use some Malibu, use some Ollie, use some worm castings. And so by the nature of having multiple good ingredients, we could kind of spread our usage out. Where had we just said we're all in with one supplier, if they ever run out, we'd have no recipes available and it could be a catastrophe. We'd had issues like Malibu one year. There was catastrophic rains. They couldn't even get into the road to access the compost piles. And that affected the quality that year and the fungus gnats and some other things that, weren't completely detrimental, but caused us to have to shift. That was years ago. So there's always something going on because we're talking about natural materials. But I think that adds to some of the fun as well.
Um, so I've never heard of that ingredient before. What does it provide to the soil?
Which one, the
Yeah.
Cuyaha? So that is the Chilean bark tree or Chilean soap bark tree. And the bark is used because it's high in saponin, and saponin is something that Coot taught us about a long time ago. We, in fact, Build as Well had shirts that said, "What's saponin?" It was kind of a joke, like, "What's saponin?" And we found out that the saponin is active in a lot of plants. Alfalfa is high in saponin. I think that's probably why you can't feed it straight to a lot of animals. But in any case, aloe vera has saponins. And we found out it's a natural plant growth promotant, but it also is the soapy. It looks like soap, it bubbles in water. That's the saponin content of the soap. And when you're getting saponin naturally from plants, there's hundreds of types of saponin or the chemical structures of it. And so you're looking for that diversity. And not only is a plant growth promotant, but it helps spread moisture evenly so that your peat moss that's kind of hydrophobic will take the moisture in like a sponge instead of shed it. And in living soil, one of the most important things is that we have good moisture so that we can biologically process the foods, the plant can take it up. And that becomes part of the process. And so early on, we started using the Therm X70, which is a yucca extract, and it looks like molasses and it's a little goopy and it works great. I still love the product. But the Cuyaha was a powder that was slightly easier to use smaller amount, have a bigger result. And so we went that direction, but really any saponin source works great. It helps just spread that moisture and it makes those slippery pathways where the biology can move around. And um, as I mentioned, besides just the moistening property, it has plant growth promoting properties. You can read a lot of white papers on that. But on top of that, it's an emulsifier. So when you have something that's soapy, it helps mix together and hold and suspend. So you can now take an oil like neem oil or something like that. You can emulsify it in the water and then you can foliar spray it. So a lot of people use the Q as a as an additive always to when they're making a foliar spray. This way you're getting that soapiness or the wetting agent that allows it to spread on the leaves and really coat it. So lots of uses. I would say that in the beginning, one of the first ingredients we were using almost every watering in large beds of soil was some sort of saponin product, whether it be just a little bit of aloe or actually adding that Therm X70. And so it was pretty natural when Jay and I were talking about it. It's like, man, this is kind of like the initial tool that you use when you have living soil. You need some sort of wetting agent, either for foliar or for the soil. And so that's why we headed that direction. And I still really believe in it. I just wish that the market wasn't so hard to get that raw material. We were talking about that today. So
Yeah, it does suck. And is it going?
yeah, you can also use soap nuts. So you can buy those. A lot of people use them for laundry. Great source of saponin. So there's many ways to do this.
You can just order those then?
Yeah, you can find soap nuts online. You can just order them, and instead of using them for the laundry, you can just throw the soap nuts in water until they get soapy, and then take them out. Or you can actually take small amounts of the soap nut and grind it into a fine powder and add it to the water. Either way, you'll get a very high saponin response. It works really, really well.
So is saponin, is that in like soap bars?
Yeah, I mean, there will be like I don't know what to describe it, right?
Yeah.
It's probably a lie. There's a chemical reaction that creates saponin, but saponin in soap. So many native plants, yada yada, create the stable frost. Saponins are named from the soapwort plant, Saponaria, whose roots were historically used as soap. Does soap contain saponin? I don't think so. Chemically, the structures of saponins in commercial soap are similar.
Oh, okay.
So
So I wonder, you could probably make natural soap with this, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people use saponins as a natural soap, and that's why the people that are really into avoiding chemicals, they will use natural sources of saponin for their laundry, so they're not using all of the chemical sources,
Oh
and
yeah.
you get the same result. So
Oh yeah, I've seen that coming up lately is the natural laundry detergents and stuff that don't contain any chemicals. Um
yep.
so like do you have like a, I don't know, like a vegan soil option?
Yeah, so Build a Soil Light is our vegan option, and we didn't necessarily design it that way, but we don't add some of the ingredients that would be questionable.
Yeah.
So some, like for instance, in 3.0, we use some fish bone meal, and when you start adding animal-based products, that's where it
Yeah.
kind of crosses the line. Um, and then the worm castings that we used are, they're fed grain, and so most people are fine with worms,
Yeah.
as long as they're not being fed, non-vegan inputs. So that works. It's not like a manure-based product or anything. Um, and so that's been our go-to for most people that are shopping for something like that is
Yeah.
the Build a Soil Light. But I often talk to people about it all the time. Like, what is the goal here
Yeah.
with the vegan inputs? And I find it surprising when I got into soil that a lot of people that are eating vegan don't realize that a lot of the vegetables that they're eating are fertilized with a lot of animal materials.
Yeah.
And so I think it comes full circle for a lot of these people that find that out. They're like, man, I just don't want to use animals in any of my stuff. And a lot of soil people think that animals are what build good soil. And so I think that we can agree on many things
Yeah.
like the treatment of animals, all those things. But at the end of the day, we have customers that ask. And so Build a Soil Light is what they buy.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, things die, they decompose into the ground to feed plants, and I don't know if I mean it is.
Well, not even that. It's just animal husbandry has been part of
Yeah.
building soil for generations. And any ranch that's doing things properly is rotating, the animals graze.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different thoughts on this. There's a lot of different authors and people that talk about the holistic and the soil and all these different things, keywords that are kind of out there.
Yeah.
But I believe it's Alan, the holistic decision making guy, that discusses the movement of cattle. And I think the reason why he was famous is he worked for, I want to say it was in Africa, worked for the government. They ended up slaughtering a lot of elephants because they thought they were ruining the ground. Well, he felt terrible about it, so did everybody, but they were wrong. It turns out that the elephants used to migrate because of predators, so they would never be in one space for too long, thus they wouldn't ruin the ground. Yeah. And so incorporating a lot of that into modern land management, it would take animals to graze and to migrate and to provide manure and all these other sources that build the soil fertility and over time.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to support a cattle ranch that has terrible treatment of animals and call it soil building. So there's a lot in there kind of wrapped up into that equation. And I think the people that really care the most, a lot of times they're growing their own food.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to make little decisions as best they can so they know what they're getting.
Yeah. And it's like with the elephant thing, it's like, how would you think that they're ruining the ground if they've been here for so many years and like they've lived on this earth for so many years, and they're obviously not destroying the ground, because how would they even be alive now if that's what they fed on? How are they alive if they are destroying the ground?
Yeah.
I think it's just like I don't even know at that point. Like,
I mean, it's complex. Their trial probably were just trying to think about how they've obviously affected by reducing the amount of land that's available and how we all coexist together. And they were trying different methodologies. And I don't think anybody just wanted to go kill elephants, but they were trying to solve a problem. They learned something.
Yeah.
And, Alan's been teaching. I think it's Alan Savory Institute. A lot of people don't like the guy. Some people love the guy. But really, it is interesting conversation to think that, of course, we used to have buffalo and bison, and I mean there was a whole migration and there was all this land, and now we've blocked it all off. And so if we really do want to keep building soil, what do those practices look like? And when we look at nature, remineralization.org is a website that discusses the need for remineralizing our soil. And they talk about going to the local rock quarry, the gravel crusher, anywhere, and getting that rock dust and spreading it. And over time, that evolved with, hey, maybe volcanic's the best, maybe glacial rock dust is the best based on the nutrient profile, the lack of heavy metals. But essentially, we were just discussing, that's how nature remineralizes. A volcano explodes, minerals are back in the soil. Or through the Ice Age, when the glaciers were being dragged through, they were also dragging and breaking up lots of minerals and moving them around. And so that's part of the alluvial rock dust that people call the glacial rock dust that is available. And instead of waiting for that to happen in our own backyard, we can just add those minerals. And so that's why we add basalt, or that's why we add crustacean meal. I can't tell you how many times It'd be like in a dried up pond or something. You'll look and there's so many little bits from crustaceans that once were part of that. And all of these little levels are what have built up the soil over years. And so we can mimic some of those activities. And that's a lot of what Build a Soil does,
Yeah.
is it takes the ingredients that we didn't invent, that people have shared with us. And it makes sense. You start thinking about it. You're like, oh, yeah, of course, compost. That's all the decomposing organic matter on top of the soil. The minerals, that was when the volcano exploded 1,000 years before that. And so all of these mixed together is what makes a soil that plants really, really thrive in.
Yeah.
And what I thought was interesting when I first started learning about this, I was like, well, how do I grow the best weed? Well, eventually I learned that cannabis is an annual flowering plant.
Yeah.
And most of the vegetables that we grow are also annual flowering. So essentially we're just growing vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
We're growing a tree or growing things that come back every single year. They're all very different in how they take up nutrients or how they establish for years before they become efficient. Where an annual plant, it's got to go from seed to start, to finish to harvest all in that same year.
Yeah.
And so the level that it takes up in nutrition and all the things that are required, I think, is very, very different than growing a lawn, right? So
Yeah. I feel like it's something where you basically have to see where cannabis has been growing for so long, living for so long, and probably like what it has adapted to almost. It's because I feel like as something goes and it's like lived for years and years, it almost like builds into itself what it wants almost. And
yeah. Well, or it adapts to living off of that,
yeah,
right? It may not always be the best thing, but it can survive off of this situation it's evolved to.
yeah,
And I will say a lot of the genetics that we grow today, I think, are not a derivative of cannabis evolving in nature,
yeah.
but are a derivative of cannabis evolving under HPS grow lights
Yeah.
in small grow situations that were hidden because it's black market and the risk was so high. And so most of the breeding that was done for a long time was under the desire to have the best short flowering, fast flowering that'll react well to these lights. And anything that worked well would be, that path was taken. And so now there's this resurgence of people that are working with landrace varieties and doing preservation projects and lots of different breeding. And it's all fun, I think, right?
Yeah. So bringing it back to like stuff like worm castings and blood meal and stuff. I know some people don't agree with hunting. I do hunt. But like basically to use every part of the animal, what would be the best way to make your own blood meal almost?
I don't know. I'm sure, with the AI or some Google search, you could find out a way to make your own blood meal. A lot of the methodologies that I've learned DIY are more using the whole animal, like using fish to make your own do-it-yourself fish emulsion.
Yeah.
But if I were to be raising my own animals for meat and had to slaughter a whole bunch of them and had to drain some of that blood out, I'd imagine there's a way to do it. And I just don't know the answer to that because I've not done it, and I wouldn't want to misspeak. I bet you could just dry it out and use it, right? Blood goes into the soil.
Yeah.
I bet you the way that they're selling it on the market is probably sterilizing it some way, heating it, dehydrating it in a faster process, like spray drying or something. And so that'd be fine, right? The reason why we don't carry blood meal is just because there's no source that comes from ethically treated, organically raised animals.
Yeah.
It's all just from the big conglomerates. But making your own, I don't see why you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if the effort would be worth it. Like the bone meal might be harder because I know they steam it.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not positive how you'd do it, but if you had all the bones, I'm guessing like making a broth, there's some way you could heat it, steam it, do whatever's required to make your own inputs. And man, I think that, yeah, like I can see why people might not want to think about hunting, but honestly, if anybody eats meat at all,
Yeah.
then hunting to me seems better than having
Yeah.
some nameless, faceless person slaughter your meat for you and package it up so that you don't have to think about it. I am not a hunter, but I would like to be, and it's something that I'm working on. So
Yeah. Yeah, if you think about it, these animals aren't like in a big building crammed together. They've lived in nature. They've
Yep.
stress-free for their whole life, and yeah, I don't know what, like, I don't know. I don't understand it.
Well, nature's vicious. I mean, I wouldn't even say stress free. Maybe they had the normal stresses of life that they got to enjoy, but when a skilled hunter Like I follow Cameron Haynes through Joe Rogan because I do jujitsu, and Cameron Haynes is like a badass bow hunter, and some part of me just wants to be a savage. Like I really want to be able to run a million miles and climb mountains and go hunt, and so there's some enamor there. But I follow him, and he explains it pretty well. Like a well placed bow arrow,
Yeah.
striking your target perfectly is probably the most merciful death that animal could have compared to in nature when a lion comes and literally rips its freaking intestines out
Yeah.
while it's alive and then eats it. Um, Nature's gnar. And as
Yeah, it is.
much as I really romance living soil and nature, there's also poison ivy and poisonous, venomous snakes, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
hardcore. So we all often, a lot of us just think about the good side,
Yeah.
but there's a lot out there. There's that the yin yang, right?
Yeah.
So
Thank God in New York we don't have any of those gnarly freaking snakes and stuff
yeah,
going out
Colorado's pretty good too. We don't have a lot of issues here in Colorado.
there. Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I feel like people just neglect to see nature and how it's worked for years and how animals there's literally a circle of life that happens and they just
yeah,
don't understand that and they'll sit
I
there.
mean it's normal. If you hit a bird while you're
Yeah.
driving or something happens, I think it's normal to get emotional about it.
Yeah.
But all of our life is built on the death of everything before us,
Yep.
and that's what soil is a big lesson in the same thing. All of that death then becomes fertility for the next set of life,
Yeah.
and that's really the cycle that we're locked into.
Hmm.
And as hard as it is to think about sometimes, it's also interesting to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that you basically have to understand the good side of it almost to get over the bad side, which honestly I feel like if you die, you go into the ground, you feed everything else living for this next cycle of life, and it's
Yep.
something that's really cool to learn about. And
No, it is. And there is no good without bad. Otherwise, it would just be all neutral.
yeah,
And although I wish I could live a million years, I probably wouldn't be on the show with you today because there'd be no motivation. Because if
yeah,
we would just do it, if we just do it 100 years from now, like who
yeah,
cares? We'll connect,
yeah,
But there is limited time. And so the fact that we're spending our time, our limited time on this earth together today,
yeah,
it means something, right?
yeah. Yep, it brings meaning. Uh, Kind of like with your plants, like your plants aren't gonna be there forever. You got a limited amount of time for them to grow. They have a lifespan, and
Yep.
it makes your time with those plants so much more valuable because you don't have all the time with those and you want to put as much effort into those as possible to get your best achieved yield or whatever you're going for, basically.
Yeah, and a lot of the best things in life are like that. They take a daily discipline that you're hoping to keep up with, and life's going to throw curveballs at you. But it's really rewarding when you can do something like that. And I think that's part of the benefit is it takes a few months to get a crop harvested your first time, and it's like, man, I did it. I stuck to it the entire time for a whole quarter of the year
Yep.
or longer. And not many people are willing to do that in this day and age. And there's something special about it. And I'm even right now, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, ooh, did I check on the plants in the 10 by 10 today? As soon as I get out of here, I'll make sure I double check them all.
Yeah.
I can almost hear them calling me, right? And we've got to record some more episodes soon. And
Yeah.
just as always with business, there's lots going on. So
Yeah. Everything now. So when I started, well, it's easier for me now because technology has just come so far that everything in my tent I can control from my phone from an app and stuff
that's pretty cool.
and
Yeah, it's amazing.
and but I'll go out there. I'm like, oh, my lights turned on. I'll go out there and I'll sit there with them for like an hour, just like kind of staring at them
Yeah.
and stuff. And like, oh,
Yeah.
does this need to be cut off? Should I cut this off? And like, oh, is that a little bit of yellow right there? I should probably correct that. And it's like, even as far as technology will come, there will never be anything to really separate you from still wanting to go out there and learn.
Yeah. They say to plant a seed is to believe in the future. And I know a lot of us that, as I mentioned, I really needed this when I started growing. And it was really nice to, instead of just going like, all right, another shitty day at work, go home and figure out what I can't afford to do or, go just kind of, maybe grab a pizza and watch TV or something, right? Just the general stuff.
Yeah.
If you're having a day that's not that great, instead it turns into, oh, I'm off work. I popped some seeds last night. I wonder if they've sprouted. And you go home and you open, you're like, okay, nothing yet. All right, I'm not going to dig in there, but I'll check in the morning. And then invariably, an hour later, maybe something happened. I'll just go look real
Yeah.
quick. I don't know. Something about that, looking forward to it, I think is a big part of that. That really is exciting. And there's always something changing. So, um, yeah, bro, I feel the same way.
Yeah, I am guilty. I remember the first seed I've ever popped, I was like, "Oh my God. Oh, why hasn't it popped above the soil yet?" And I dug and I accidentally broke the root off, and I remember being so like upset with myself because I did that. And then from
Yep.
then on, from that seed, from the very first seed, I have never dug down. Or I'm just like, "Yep, that will pop." I'm doing that again because it was just
Yep.
such a bad thing.
I'll dig occasionally, if it's been 5, 6 days or something.
Yeah,
But I've been surprised enough where if you go directly into soil, sometimes it's the next day, sometimes it's, usually three
yeah,
days, sometimes it's 10 days. And you're like, how the hell did that even happen?
yeah. Seeds are weird.
And I will dig around a little bit. But if you pop lots of seeds, you just know that there's some
Oh
runts.
yeah,
There's some that just pop and then get eaten alive. And, you always want 100%, but nature
yeah,
doesn't work that way. And so, of course, when you get 100%, it's exciting. But to expect that from seed every time kind of sets yourself up for disappointment. And, same with life. So it's good to have high expectations, but you got to be kind to yourself. And seeds can be wild.
oh yeah.
So,
Seeds are weird. This grow did 25. Started 25 seeds, and I think like 10 of them didn't sprout. I thought it was probably because I planted them too deep, and I think it was because when I restarted it and I did it like a fourth of an inch, they all sprouted. But all those seeds that were in there that I dumped back into my tote to my living soil tote, I checked my living soil tote. And I like maybe 2 days later, and there's sprouts of those seedlings coming up, and I was like, okay, so you wouldn't sprout when you were in the cup, but I dump you in a tote, and and when I pull them out, the stems are so long, like they grew from like maybe midway in that tote all the way up just to sprout, and I was like, okay, well, wow,
you're like, man, you can sprout from concrete from the middle of a tote, but when I baby you, you don't do anything. It's like,
yeah,
how is this even possible? I've had cups, like, red party beer cups that I've cut the bottoms off of and they were labeled and I had a seed. And I'm like, well, that didn't pop. And I'd go take 4 or 5 and I'd just dump the soil over my fence and I'd take the cups, bring them back inside.
yeah,
And then, like next spring, I'd be looking and there's plants growing there. And I'm like, well, shit.
yeah,
Apparently those seeds were still viable. So,
yeah. The thing people don't understand about seeds is that, like us, plants want to grow, they want to live, and people will just be like discard them as duds. When in
yeah.
reality they just may just be stubborn seeds that you may
Yeah.
have discarded, and they were probably like, okay, well, I'm about to grow now, and I'm growing here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's weird too because it makes sense. Nature, like, if every seed was exactly the same, like thickness,
Yeah,
and they all germinated in the same minute after they were wet, well, what if the rain came, all the seeds popped, and then there was no rain for 3 more weeks and they all die?
yeah,
Where vice versa, the way nature does it is normally some of the seeds might germinate, some might take another 10 days. And the ones that took 10 days this time may have made it to the next rain and then had an entire season to produce. And so I feel like having that diversity allows a little bit of built in security to preservation. So,
yeah. Which is like the water things. It's like a reason why these plants have formed bonds with stuff like mycorrhizae and
yep.
other things that can go out and grab water, grab stuff for them. It's like it's these almost unseen bonds by like
Yeah.
newer growers maybe that are just so that teach you a lot because these plants are actually really smart, and they'll just form bonds with all these things like bacteria and everything that will grab
Yeah. I
everything
mean,
for
with
them.
humans, they have us talking about them right now and literally tending to them as
Yeah,
their slave. So I feel like at some point the plant really like is more intelligent.
and we need them and they need us vice versa for basically like what you breathe, what you exhale, They take in
Yep.
what you exhale and they give you back what you
They
need.
breathe that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
So that's our bond with them, and they've been here way longer than we have. And yeah,
Crazy.
it is crazy to think about. Um, so like, what recipe do you use right now,
I
personally?
like the 3.0 and the light. Just depends. Usually I throw light into like my vegetative, like when I'm sexing things, and I'll just go straight into 3.0 because I'll flour pretty quickly after that. And then if I'm setting up a huge bed, sometimes I'll mix the two together. But like at home, I have just straight 3.0, especially because I'm so busy. So at home on the seeds that I popped for the 420 grow off, I just started them in solo cups, small cups, and once they popped, I put them directly into 3.0 and had great results. And then, in fact, the bag was like on my back porch frozen all winter. And then I brought it into my garage to thaw. And by April, it was warm and it was perfectly moist in my garage from absorbing some of the snow and through the bag. And so I kind of opened it, was thinking, should I use this? And I went, yeah, let's use it. It looks great. So I popped the seeds in it, went great. Then I put the same soil into the 1 gallons, and literally it had just been water only,
Oh yeah,
and they're fully set. They're beautiful. And now I just transplanted them yesterday into the 4x8 bed that's all 3.0 and like its fourth or fifth cycle. And I'll top dress it and I'll just water only the rest of the way. And at home, I truly go hardcore water only a lot of the times
oh yeah,
because I'm tending to the grow here. I'm busy. I've got jujitsu. I've got a family. I've got the business, and I'm trying to work out, and I'm trying to go running, and I'm trying to clean up the garage, and just always trying to do stuff right so that
yeah,
I can better my life. And although I love spending time with the plants at home, lately with most of the dedication here at the office where we spend a lot of time tinkering, I'll get home and I'll be like, open the tent. I'm like, do you need water? Okay, they need water. Okay, close the tent. All right, I'll check tomorrow.
yeah,
And it's not always like that. Sometimes I get to spend a lot of time with them, but when you are busy and you have a run that still goes flawlessly
yeah,
because you keep up with the minimums like the environment and the watering, it really does remind you how little these plants need.
yeah.
And so it's a lot of what we do is kind of extra. It's pretty incredible to see. So,
Yeah, that's the thing about living soil. It's basically nature's like, yeah, I got this, bro. Just go do you, and I'll take care of these guys right here. I'll form
yep.
I'll form an ecosystem inside of me that will. It's like it's almost like if you're running living soil and you were to take a vacation for a month, and you let's say you have like a watering system that goes off and it will water 'em. If you
Uh-huh.
come back to that, you're gonna come back to like a jungle almost, and you're like,
Yep.
oh wow, because this is how people don't. I don't know if they understand this is how they grow in nature. You like
Yeah, it's unreal.
it's like
Like a branch might snap, but then it'll just keep growing. It'll
oh
be
yeah,
leaning, and then like you'll come back, and you can literally have a jungle.
yeah,
In fact, there's some of our customers that have medical issues or whatever else. They'll grow in big beds with automatic watering, and worst case, you have to go to the hospital for a week, come back, and you probably have a full grow going still without even calling a buddy over. Where when you're on a full hydro system, it's like telling your buddy, okay, 5 parts per million of this, measure the pH, put that in, don't fuck this up,
yeah,
make sure that doesn't get clogged. It can be very scary leaving somebody in charge of a hydro grow
oh yeah,
if you do it
yeah.
for a weekend, I want a week or two. So
And versus putting your trust into something that's been around for billions of years, or
yeah, I think people fear. You know what it is? I think they fear that they'll do it wrong and they have no control.
yeah,
So they'll be like, the soil won't work, and now I can't fix it.
yeah,
And I really feel like soil testing, all these different things, they're important. But what they've really taught me is that there's a wide range that the plant will do very, very well in, and you don't have to be perfect. Like some
yeah,
people are so particular about the nitrogen levels or so particular about certain things. And I've taken the same soil fresh out of the bag, sent it to the lab, then taken that same exact soil, rinsed it with a little tiny bit of water, put it in a bag, and sent the sample off. And some of the results that you get are very, very different just from one watering. Because when you freshly mix something, it might be in the soil, but it may not be like part of the soil once watered. And so a lot of times these excesses get fixed almost immediately after the first watering.
yeah,
And so sometimes it's hard to just blindly trust a soil test. And although I really, really think they're important, um, there's just levels that you go through. In the beginning, you don't need anything, no pH, no soil test, no
yeah,
whatever. You have your first issue and you're like, well, what if I knew soil testing and I knew all these things? Maybe I could correct things before they became a problem. And for the most part, following good ingredients and basic recipes, I feel like most of that stuff goes out the window and you can just experience pretty good rounds. On a commercial level, I get you have to be pretty dialed in, but for
Yeah,
the home grower, if you have a few extra plants, you usually have more than you need. So
yeah,
don't have to get so weird.
yeah. It's living soil. One of the cool things about it is that it's pretty good at correcting itself.
If you have time.
Yeah. With so like I with pH wise, I've heard that it um will correct the pH if you put it in there. Uh, so like, does it correct the pH? Like if you put
What
like
does what?
if you let's say your water's 7.3 and you pour it
Uh-huh.
in there, I've heard that it will correct the pH down to like what it wants almost.
Yes and no. So the pH in soil is a derivative of the cations, anions, all the different things that are built in that
Yeah.
soil. And so if you picture one of those vases where you have the different color sand in there,
Yes.
hydro, there's just no sand. So the pH of the water is what matters. But in the vase picture where you picture calcium, potassium, magnesium, all those different layers stacked in there, that structure is what creates the pH.
Hmm.
And so if you have too much sodium, the pH is going to be high.
Yeah.
If you have too much magnesium, the pH is going to be high. If you have higher calcium and you have lower of those in the proper order, the pH might be just dead perfect. And so starting off with something at least of a semblance of the proper balance would be great. But if you take 7.3 water, it's probably going to do nothing to the level of calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium. So it's not going to change the pH of the soil.
Yeah.
However, that little bit of water at that exact pH could help pick up what is in solution in the soil up into the plant. So it'll have some minor effects. However, I think what you're asking about is the plant's roots.
Oh yeah.
Early on, we learned that the rhizosphere, or the 1 to 2 millimeter space around the root tip of that growing plant, the plant can actually produce exudates that steer the biology in that area and can change the pH by more than a point or two, which on a logarithmic scale is a huge difference. And what they're doing is they're trying to exchange for nutrients, and so they can actually dictate the curve there of that pH. Um, I think in an annual flowering plant in potting soil, we're probably not seeing as much of that as you would see in nature over long periods of time. But I know that when you have cover crop growing, lots of roots in the soil, I feel like it does correct a lot of the issues. So a lot of people that were building soils from scratch and they started using cover crop, it would manage the moisture for them. It would manage the pH of the soil. It would manage dealing with excesses by having the cover crop eat it instead of your main cash crop.
Yeah.
And so it almost mellow things out if overdone. And I think there's lots of ways that nature has to deal with that. I'll see soil tests that come back when the soil is kind of freshly mixed at a lower pH than I would expect. And as you start growing, it balances out right away.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is just from sitting in a bag where like the nitrogen process that's happening as all the decay is going on can swing things. But once they're opened and used, I find little effect on the actual end result. Things balance themselves out really pretty well. So
Yeah. Yeah, this was my first time actually using cover crops. I used hairy vetch and clover as nitrogen fixers for my plants, and it really helped a lot with keeping the moisture inside the soil. You didn't have to water as much. Uh, and it was so the vetch actually I didn't notice that it was going to be that viney where it's crawling up and it's latching onto your plant stuff, and
yep.
it was kind of cool because some parts of my plant that would maybe be slouching, it was almost like the vetch latched onto it and kind of held it up almost, which I thought that was cool. And to learn that like that these cover crops create bonds with the bacteria that will then take nitrogen from the air and then put them down into the soil to make them available for those microbes to basically process. And it's
It is pretty amazing.
yeah.
I feel like indoors, we probably get more of the once the plant has grown and dies, it re-releases
Mhm.
nutrients. But I know in a field, when the cover crop is growing fast and has a whole season to grow, it creates those root nodules, they call it,
Mhm.
and they're able to extract that nitrogen straight from the air. And so I wouldn't discount that. There's definitely an effect there. But I also feel like when you grow lots of green plant and you chop and drop it right on top of the soil, it creates this explosion of azose bacteria and things that process nitrogen, and it creates results for you.
Yeah.
And then the worms eat it and it creates more available nutrients. And just like humans, like yeah, we need minerals. A lot of people take vitamins because of that, but we don't want to go eat rocks. That's not how our body works. So
Yeah.
we eat plants, and the plants, the best nutrition typically comes from something that eats the sun and uses that energy to eat minerals. And so plants is that. It's basically the liquid energy of the sun through its sugars and carbon and that it creates, and that allows it to break down these minerals that we can't digest and turn them into more of an organic form. And it makes a huge difference when you're eating nutrient dense food. And
Yeah.
so when we're talking about the soil, there's all those bonds, relationships, cover crops doing the same thing and then dying and making some of those minerals that it was able to eat differently than our annual plant
Yeah.
and make those available to the soil. So, I mean, it makes sense. But when we first started doing it, it's like, oh, there's more fungus gnats because of the cover crop, or there's like, why would you do that? It's going to like steal all the nutrients from your soil, and then you're not going to have any left for your plant. And I don't know, it didn't turn out that way. It seems like it really does work pretty well to do like a living mulch or to do it between round cover cropping. And we do it all the time. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool to see how different animals get their minerals. I learned this last year because I live next to a railroad track. I'm like, why are there so many deer that are like walking on the railroad track? It's because the metal shavings that come off of the railroad track, they'll lick that up. They gain their iron.
interesting. Yeah, we did a YouTube video recently on a local homestead farm that makes organic raw milk, and they have a mineral like a wood thing on the wall with all these little cubbies full of each individual sulfate and different mineral. And they say that the cows will just go up and pick and choose exactly what they want, almost like they know what they need.
Yeah,
And that's so interesting to me. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, you see the goats climbing up in the mountains just to lick the
yeah,
rocks. So I feel like,
yeah. That's where they get their salt from. It's insane how they can
yeah,
even do that. Scale these freaking like almost 90-degree walls, and that's how they'll escape animals too. And like I remember this one video. I can't remember what was trying to chase them up the wall, but it did, and it just basically fell off the wall. And then the ghost just proceeded to just lick the salt off the wall. It's like, how? How did they evolve to do this? And why? Like what made it so
yep.
convenient to them? It must have been because that's the only source of salt that was there. So they had to evolve to basically scale these friggin' 90-degree just slants. It's it's
It's
insane.
unbelievable though. It seems like it's genetically built in. How would you know that you need salt even or that they needed it? Like
Yeah.
it is pretty crazy. And I feel like we see that everywhere. So the fact that we would think plants don't have any of that doesn't make sense. I believe that plants do, and different genetics do require slightly different things. And the idea with living soil is to give them the whole buffet and let them decide and figure it out instead of like trying to be so in control of exactly what they get per genetic. I mean, I used to have people in the beginning who was like, yeah, but do you have one for OG Kush or do you have like a sour diesel soil or like, what's going to be the best for my particular plant?
Yeah.
Like we have soil for annual flowering plants. They'll work for any of them. Um, Apparently a lot else. I mean, most of us use the same soil recipes for house plants and lots of things, and it works really well. So
Yeah. So so they're asking like if there's a soil that will fit that specific strain.
yeah, people would get weird on it. They would
Oh,
say,
what the
"Hey, yeah,
hell?
but I know that my particular cut here it uses more calcium than others. So do you have a
Yeah.
soil for that, or whatever the hypothesis was?"
Yeah.
And I just think that giving them a boilerplate diet allowed certain plants to show differences in what they need.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they couldn't get those differences if provided in living soil.
Yeah.
And so we just learned that all plants do pretty well. Now, some of the landrace varieties don't do quite as well in the really heavily loaded soils.
Yeah.
I feel like they've naturally evolved to
Yeah.
be able to get nutrients easier
Mhm.
from less. And so I mean, you take somebody who's hardcore from the streets and you put them up in like the Ritz Carlton. They may not be so comfortable. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it might be seen easier, but it may not be what they're used to. And I feel like you take a landrace plant that's used to mining for its own food,
Yeah.
and you would pour it on. You'll notice that they kind of claw out. And they just
Yeah.
don't like it as much. Other than that, every plant I've grown in there has really liked the living soil.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the land races, because they've been growing where they have for so long, they've grown attuned to their soil composition that they've been like their
yeah,
generations,
less.
yeah, their ancestors, the drop seeds where they've came from. So I feel like
Yep.
if you almost like I feel like if you just went there and you just took a chunk out of the soil and just threw that in a like a tote, mixed that up, I feel like they'd be more fine tuned to that almost. Like, um,
Yeah. I've tried straight native soil from my
oh
backyard in a
yeah,
pot, and the problem you get is
yeah,
in nature, the roots can expand across the surface, and there doesn't have to be this drainage aeration characteristic as it's kind of grounded to the earth.
hmm
But as soon as you get that texture in a container, it's like it can't breathe.
yeah,
And so I'm adding that aeration or cover crop to help break it down, like, and it's just slower,
yeah,
you know? So,
yeah. It's like a cake almost. It's because it's
yeah.
what is the what is that first layer of the earth called? It's the crust, I think, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
I can't remember. It's been so long since I was in earth science. Uh, yeah, it's weird because it's almost like that meme you see floating around, like plants outside. It's like I'll grow I grow through concrete, and then it's like the plants indoors. Oh, you gave me the wrong type of nitrogen.
Yeah, it's so true, man. Um, you know, I feel like that just speaks volumes to the fact that obviously plants can be resilient, but
Mhm.
environment, nature, nurture, all of that's super important. And there's always exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, like, man, there's certain houseplants that are just impossible to grow. They're so finicky. You
Yeah.
overwater them one time and they die.
Yep.
But I feel like where they must have evolved in nature probably doesn't have that as an issue,
Yeah.
and they do great. And so for us, it's difficult to try and achieve what they're used to. But um, luckily, most plants aren't that finicky.
Yeah.
So it's actually pretty easy. I feel like a lot of the black thumb effect, so to speak, where people think they can't grow,
Yeah.
is because they go to Home Depot or the grocery store, they impulse buy 5 to 10 plant and vegetable starts that are already root bound
Yep.
and struggling. And then they put them in some quasi organic soil that probably has no real fertility, that peters out pretty quickly. And then they, get too small of an amount of that soil because it's still kind of expensive for what was an impulse buy.
Yeah.
And they dump it in some native soil that just doesn't work very well. And they go, man, I can't grow.
Yeah.
Well, if it was from seed, it probably would have been great. If it was good soil, it would have been great.
Yeah.
If there's so many variables, and so once we unlock those key differences in our own grow, it's almost like how can someone not grow? I mean,
Yeah.
literally, you just put the freaking seed in there and you water it, and it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But that's what Build a Soul is based off of. We really have an entire business teaching people stuff that everyone should already know.
Yeah.
And I was one of those. I grew up in a cul-de-sac. I didn't know this. It was magic to see a plant grow.
Mhm.
I mean, you take a potato, you dig a hole, you throw it in there, and you cover it, and you come back, and you have dozens of potatoes.
Yep.
Like nature is abundant, and tapping into that, I think, is a really important lesson. And you start to see abundance in more places in your life. Um, yeah, man, we joke about it all the time, but cannabis really is a gateway, and it's a gateway, I think, to gardening and a healthier lifestyle and asking better questions. So
Yeah.
even though you don't smoke, I feel like you're going through a lot of the same effects
Yeah.
that all of us are in this similar pursuit.
Yeah. And one thing I can tell new growers is don't rush into it. Do your research before you do this, because I remember I did this and everybody around you is like, "Oh yeah, it's easy. It's easy." And these people probably haven't grown in their lives. And and then you hop into it, you get a shitty medium. You get a shitty it has no drainage, and you're like, "Man, wow, I suck at this. Why does this look like this?" But you gotta
Yep.
there's bottlenecks. That's the word I've heard. It's
Yeah, if you don't find those fundamental basics and you don't get that right, then yeah, it can be really, really hard.
yeah, and it does suck because you get the only places around you that have soil are always pushing on you that this bag soil is good for your plants and stuff. It's really good, and you get it, and it's just caked mud almost.
Yeah. I mean, even our potting soil, I feel like we make some really good potting soil. But for us to produce thousands and thousands of bags,
Yeah.
I feel like at some point, no matter how good the production is,
hmm
it's still better to make a homemade meal. It's still better to turn on your own barbecue and make your own burgers than it is to go down to the steakhouse down the
Yeah.
street. And of course, they should be able to do a better job. But we're talking thousands of bags, and then it sits in a bag, and it's shipped, and it's sewn and closed, and it doesn't breathe the same. I feel like making it with your own two hands and putting your energy into it, moistening it perfectly,
Yeah.
watching it heat up and come to life, it fully connects you to the process. And we really think that
Yep.
making your own soil is the way to go. And I wish I could get everybody to do it. But of course, people buy our bag soil, and I'm
Yep.
super grateful because it allows us to have the ingredients so that we can offer it for people to make their own. It all kind of goes together. So
Yeah. Yeah. I know a place near about me. It's a farmer's market, and they let their soil sit out to get rained on all the time. So you get it, and it's like almost like a copper look around the bag, and it's always like mud almost. It's like mud.
crazy.
Yeah, it sucks. And um, I actually have a tote of coconut core outside, and a tote. I'm gonna mix that with compost and perlite, and I actually use grown onto Nature's Living soil now, where they
Cool.
send you it's like a bag of he's when I had him on, he said it was basically, he was thinking, he was like, why are people shipping bags of soil when you can ship the components to mix your own soil with, like you guys do? You guys ship the components, but
No, we do both.
yep.
We ship the components. But what we found from our customer base is that the biggest,
Yeah.
most important component is the compost. And so if they get that wrong, it doesn't matter what bag I send them. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, it's but for some reason I don't know why they don't want to buy the components. Maybe because they think they'll screw up when they're mixing it.
Maybe. So we've noticed that people can only find perlite, and we preach against it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are like, well, if I can't find the pumice, if I can't find the compost,
Mhm.
and I can't find the ingredients, maybe I'll just get the whole thing. Now, typically, what is available locally is the peat moss,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
dude, we can talk about this part for hours longer. I think just the cocoa core, the peat moss, the mixing your own. But
Yeah.
I've got to run for the day, and I could tell we could just keep going for hours, man. So
Yeah.
maybe we'll do another one or something.
Oh yeah,
But I
for
really
sure.
enjoyed this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I'm really interested in talking about this stuff. So like sometimes I look down, I'm like, oh, this has been recording for an hour and 16 minutes. I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
even
for
notice.
sure. No, and I could sit here all day, but then I hear like you'll probably saw me once I look over my phone vibrated, or I'll get
Yeah.
a message and I'm like, people are waiting on me here at the office. And so I've definitely got to get going, but
Yeah.
I enjoyed this and I think we should do it again.
Oh yeah, definitely.
As far as ingredients and all that stuff, man, like Nature's Living Soil, any of those companies, I think there needs to be more of us, more
Yeah.
people doing this. I think you should try it all. And I do agree with you that mixing your own soil from scratch is really rewarding, man. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's not a lot of companies doing the living soil part the way you and Nature's Living Soil are kind of doing it, where you kind of sell the components to make it. I
yeah.
don't know if it's because it's a draw away, but I feel like all these like it's like I feel like with these industries it's almost not competition. It's more like because you guys are kind of just putting it out there, almost you're making it more
Yeah.
popular, and people you like you and Nature's Living Soil are just like, it's really cool, and I feel like more people should come on to Living Soil, honestly, and building their own. It's
Yeah, like I don't want to get the company any bigger. I mean, it's fine if people want it, okay?
yeah,
Because I don't want to say no. But realistically, as long as my bills are paid and I get to do this, I'm stoked.
yeah,
And there really is an abundance out there. There's more than enough for all of us to make authentic relationships and help people build their soil and have fun doing it. And honestly, one of the things I've learned, just like life with a home budget, you can have a $100 million company and be spending $101 million and be really sad.
yep,
Or you could have a $1 million company, be living a great life, and not care to go to 100 million. It's just all about what it does for you, just like what these plants do for you. And if anybody's ever popped too many seeds at one time, you realize how too much of a good thing can become a problem really quickly. So it's like there should be more of us. We should all just have a blast doing it. And there is no perfect soil. There's no perfect recipe that's going
yeah,
to grow the best plant ever. It's just, I feel like when I've learned a lot about living soils, it's like avoiding these key excesses. Other than that, good genetics, good environment, good discipline, and
yeah,
all of this should work. So,
yeah. People don't understand when you reach the top of the mountain, there's no more to climb. It's almost like built in the
Yeah.
human uh, biology or mentality that you want something to work towards to keep yourself.
Listen, after your first harvest, after you know you have some good weed, there is no more destination. It's just all about the process.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we'll end it off here. Thank you all for watching this episode of the CUNDA-CAST podcast with Jeremy from Build a Soil. It was fun, and we'll probably have him back on the show again.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me on, bro. I appreciate you working with me on these scheduling difficulties, and you know how to get in touch now, bro.